It's Amanchu. Welcome to Divergence SMP. Now, I have some projects that I had planned to do, but a couple days ago, another member of this SMP, Silly, asked for my help. He'd been working on trying to make a mob farm and just couldn't get it to work. So he asked if I could build one for him. Somebody in the server asked me to make a farm. He gets me. He gets me. So anyway, I thought I'd come out here to the site where he tried to make a farm and see what I can make of it. And it took me a minute to recognize this as the farm, or his attempt at a mob farm. It kind of looks like a half-finished statue of some kind. But rest assured, this is the place. Now, I don't want to pick on him too much. This looks like the kind of farm someone would make that doesn't know anything about how to make a mob farm. But I think there's some lessons to be learned here. So, what he's got in here, if I break away some of this, is there's a spawning area in here for the mobs to spawn on. There's platforms for them to spawn on. And this area is totally closed off, so it'll be completely dark. You have water channels here that should get the mobs to come down here and into here. And, ooh, I didn't even see this part. Let's see, do I have any scaffolding? I didn't look into the interior that well. I could build up here. Yeah, so he has... This is cool, what he did here. Another spawning area here. And this is something I definitely would have suggested he do. He put down scaffolding here. And mobs can spawn inside the scaffolding in Bedrock Edition. So they can spawn on this surface here. And as long as they're more than one block tall, and most mobs will be, they'll get pushed by the water streams into the central pit. So that's good. Very good design. I didn't know he'd done that. And then the mobs would, in theory, get pushed down to here. They put that back. Where the player would presumably stand, waiting for the mobs to come to him. Now, there's a number of problems with this farm I can see right away that would mean that it will never work. The biggest issue it has is with the distances. Mobs can't spawn right next to the player. They have to be a certain distance away. And that distance is dependent on your simulation distance. I'm going to put up a chart that shows at different simulation distances the distance at which mobs will spawn. This is on a realm, so the sim distance is 4, which means mobs can only spawn between 24 and 44 blocks away from the player. That's a problem because the spawning surfaces in this farm are way closer than 24 blocks away from the area where I presume that you would be standing waiting for the mobs to show up. So nothing is going to spawn in there. It's just too close. Another issue that this farm has, which I'm sure if it had worked, he would have figured out pretty quickly. Skeletons, creepers, witches, and baby zombies would all have the ability to get at you if you're standing here and hurt you. You want to be able to set up the area where the mobs drop into where you can attack them, but they can't hit you back. And this is just not going to work. Another issue this farm has is with lighting. To be sure, the land all around here is well lit up, and that's good. But you know what isn't lit up? The roof of this farm. That's unlit, allowing mobs to spawn up here on the roof. And that's not to mention down here on the ground where you presumably would be standing. I have no idea what's beneath my feet. There could be caves down there within 44 blocks range that are not lit up where mobs could also spawn. That's no good. Now, in theory, you could go caving in the area and try to find any caves under there and light them up. But I have a technical term for that. It's what I would call a PETA. I'll leave it to you to figure out what PETA stands for. And the only other issue I see with this, it's getting into a little nitpicking here because it would probably work if not for all those other things. But another thing that makes it a little less than efficient is the size of these spawning platforms is tiny. You want to make the area which the mobs are able to spawn for the farm as huge as you can. Make them as big as possible. And this area is just way too small. You want to make it bigger than that, especially in Bedrock Edition. So other than the distances and the lighting around it and the AFK spot not being safe and the platforms not being big enough, otherwise, yeah, it has some of the principles down. But needless to say, it's beyond my ability to fix it with a few tweaks. I'm going to have to start over from scratch. I've gathered in all of these boxes what I hope to be enough materials to build the farm. And I might even use some of the materials from this farm to make the build. I'm going to start by pillaring up scaffolding 44 blocks straight up in the air. The original attempt at a farm here is still in range for spawning, but the ground is not. I'm ultimately going to tear that down so that at this height, 44 blocks above the ground, there will be no surfaces anywhere around where mobs can spawn. So the spawning platforms that I build, which will be above this, will be the only places where mobs can spawn in range. I'm going to build here a platform that will be the bottom of the farm where the player will stand. I'm not going to use a trident killer for this farm, so it's going to be as simple as I can make it. But I am going to use some redstone in collection system, as you can see behind me. If redstone kind of intimidates you and you don't really care about redstone, you don't want to bother with it, you don't need to make this farm. And you can just skip ahead and not bother with the explanation. But I will do my best to describe what's going on with this redstone that I've made. Right there are 4 slabs on top of 4 hoppers. That's the location where the mobs are going to drop to. And you will be standing right next to that, swinging at the mobs. The hoppers, the 4 hoppers underneath, will collect all the drops, and they'll drop down through those hoppers to there. Now, from there they go through this chain of hoppers to an item filter for unstackable items. I have some other chests that are kind of in the way of this, but you can see there's a comparator there that's right up against the chain of hoppers feeding into these chests. The comparator is going to sense when there's anything in the hopper behind it. And the more things are in the hopper behind it, the more full that hopper is, the stronger the output of that comparator. If it's an unstackable item that's passing through that hopper, the comparator is not going to put on a signal strong enough to pass down to this far to this repeater, which would turn off that torch and unlock that hopper. If it's an unstackable item passing through those hoppers, then that top hopper is going to be 20% full. The comparator will put on a signal strong enough to cause this redstone torch to turn off and unlock that hopper, and it will pull out the unstackable items. So all of the unstackable items like bows and swords and armor will go into this series of chests here, which ultimately feeds into this dropper, which is facing down into that lava source. If I turn this switch off, I have 2 observers here facing each other. They're just constantly ticking, and that will power the dropper and cause all the items to drop down into the lava and be destroyed. So you can get rid of all the garbage items you don't want. But by turning it off, it means you can fill up these chests without disposing of the items, giving you a chance to look through that stuff for anything you want to save before you turn this on and dispose of all the items. So in other words, I'm going to filter out all the unstackable items. Everything else that's stackable goes into this column of chests here. I'm not doing any sorting of all that other stuff. But sorters have a problem in Bedrock Edition. They're notoriously unreliable. And that's where this little bit of redstone comes in. all the items passing through this chain of hoppers is going to pass by this. This observer will detect if there's any items in this hopper. If there are, it's going to put out a redstone signal, turning on this repeater and powering all this redstone and causing this hopper here to lock. So as soon as this hopper pushes an item into that hopper, this hopper locks and won't push any more items into it until this hopper is empty again. And to show you how that works, if I don't have this here and it's not operating, and I dump a bunch of items into here, you can look at here and you'll see there's a stone brick in here. It's just a constant flow of stone bricks passing through here. But with this redstone active, what will happen is an item will get pushed in that hopper, and then another item won't get pushed in until after the item that was in there gets pushed out. So that kind of slows down the rate at which things feed through. And slowing it down that much allows the filter on the other side of it to operate a lot more reliably. Hopefully with this system in place, I'm not going to have unstackable items sneaking through this filter and ending up with all the other stuff. Okay, redstone explanation over. Now, I need to set it up so that anyone using this farm can stand here at the bottom of what will be a pit where the mobs will drop onto these slabs and be able to swing at them without the mobs being able to attack them back. So I got to make a platform here to work from. Okay, I think that looks good. From here you can swing at the mobs, but they can't see you. You can just swing at their feet, and there's no way they can make eye contact with you, and I don't think there's any angle at which even a creeper would be able to see you and start to detonate. I don't think. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay. So now I've made a nice, safe, walled-off, well-lit area where you can stay and swing at the mobs. The item collection area is one floor down, right here. Again, nice, safe, walled-off area that's well-lit. Now, wait, can I reach that top chest? Yes, I can. Okay, good. I want to build up from the bottom of these hoppers 21 more blocks. So that's... the hoppers are at Y117, so I want to go up 21 blocks from that. That's Y38. I want the spawning platform to be at this level. However, one problem I'm going to have with this drop chute is spiders, because spiders can climb walls. So I'm going to actually replace all of the blocks of this drop chute with campfires. Unlit campfires. Because spiders can't climb campfires. But the thing is, because I can't stack campfires on top of other campfires, I had to build all the solid blocks first and then place the campfires on top, then break the blocks below. Putting campfires on the bottom means that potentially the mobs could see me. from this opening, I need to go out in each direction 8 blocks. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then I will fill in this whole platform here, and that will make this platform 18 by 18. This will be the place where the mobs can spawn. It's a nice big area. Okay, things are starting to take shape. Now on top of all this, I'll put a row of glass just to make it look pretty. I could use any solid blocks here. It doesn't have to be glass. You don't need to be able to see into the farm. And if you're wondering, if I'm just using stained glass, light can pass through, so how am I going to make the interior dark? I'll get to that. Don't worry. Do you remember how Silly had a setup like this? It may have been hard to make it out, but he had scaffolding all along some of the platforms, and then water streams going over the top of that scaffolding. That is a really good strategy, because in Bedrock Edition, the mobs can spawn inside the scaffolding. They can spawn like on top of that block, even though there's scaffolding over it. And when that happens, there'll be water streams flowing over the top of the scaffolding, which will immediately push all the mobs into the central pit. Of course, there are 2 exceptions to that. Spiders, obviously, are shorter than 2 blocks. They're only 1 block tall. So when they spawn inside the scaffolding, they're not going to get pushed immediately by the water streams. However, spiders like climbing things, and it won't take long before the spiders climb up the scaffolding into the water streams and start getting pushed by it. And then there's baby zombies. Baby zombies are a problem. I don't really have a good solution for baby zombies. I have to hope that the baby zombies would eventually despawn, or maybe I can do something with trapdoors to try and fool them into dropping into the pit. But hopefully there won't be too many baby zombies taking up the mob cap. Oh, one thing I almost forgot. If I put water sources all around these outside edges, I'm going to end up with the water filling in. That's better. Now the water sources won't fill in all the empty spots and make a huge lake here. Alright, I place light sources all along here because I'm going to find it easier to just put down ice and let the light sources melt the ice. I can't just break the ice, that won't work. Because if I break ice that's sitting on top of scaffolding, it'll just destroy it. It won't create a water source. I need to make it melt. And while I wait for this ice to melt, I'm going to make another spawning platform, because why not? Why the heck not? In fact, I intend to make 6 spawning platforms. 1 stacked on top of the other. But the rest of these platforms I'm going to shape a little differently. They will be perfectly square. Alright, so this is the next level up. And what I've done here is placed blocks, made the floor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks out, and then a row of trapdoors, which I will then open. The hope there is that maybe it will trick the little baby zombies into wandering over where these trapdoors are and into the pit. I'll put water sources along just this wall. and scaffolding out to there. There. Now, the main reason for building this a different shape, if I made every platform the same as the bottom one was, and just had that 2x2 hole in the center, mobs that spawned up here or on higher platforms above this would all fall straight down through that center hole, and they'd fall more than 23 blocks. They'd fall far enough that most mobs would die just from the fall damage, and that's not what I want. This way, most of the mobs are gonna, from these upper platforms, slide down onto the bottom platform. The water breaks their fall, and then they slide the rest of the way down to that pit. That way, almost all of the mobs that are pushed down to that central pit will be hurt badly enough that you could take them out in one hit, but they won't be killed by the fall. Okay, so that's 2 spawning platforms already. I'm gonna make 4 more on top of this, and I'll get back to you when it's time to put a roof on. Alright, that is 6 levels done. If I made any more levels above this, it might get outside of the 44 block range if I'm standing at the bottom of this farm. So it probably wouldn't do any good to add any more levels in this. Now, this will work at night, obviously, but I need to darken this enough so that it'll work day or night. And to do that, I'm going to make a roof over the top of this whole thing with leaves. Alright, to make this, I'm going to build up 8 blocks above the platform. Maybe 9. 9 blocks above the platform. And I'll cover over the whole thing in leaves. Why this works is complicated, but I'll do my best to explain. In order for most hostile mobs to spawn in the overworld, they need the light level from any light sources to be 0. I.e. no light at all. A light source like an end rod that you see down there gives off a light level of 15. And that drops by 1 for every block away from it. So any kind of artificial light source, other than ambient skylight, like from an end rod or a torch or a lantern, or for that matter, glow lichen, or even brown mushrooms that give off a light level of 1, those can prevent mob spawns. But for skylight, it's different. You don't need a skylight a level of 0 for mobs to spawn. You need a skylight level of less than 7. And full daylight is light level 15. So what the leaf blocks do is they're going to reduce the light level from skylight by 1. And then every block below the leaves, it drops by 1 more. So if I have full skylight above the leaves, the leaf blocks will drop that light level to 14, and it drops 1 for every space below it. So if it's 8 levels down, 14 minus 8 is 6. So that reduces the light level from ambient skylight to 6 at the spawning platform. But it's actually even less than that, because the water streams themselves also reduce the light level, so that the spawning area underneath those water streams is going to be even less than that. But that's why I wanted to put the leaf blocks 8 or 9 blocks above the top of the platform. Skylight can also bleed out over the edges of the farm, so I need to actually build out from the edge of the farm another 8 blocks on every side. This should guarantee that all the platforms below are going to be dark enough. Also, I probably should get rid of all these end rods now, because all the ice on this level melted. Build up the wall around here so that it's high enough that I'm sure no mobs are going to get out. I don't think they would anyway, but now for sure, nothing that spawns here is going to be able to get out onto the wall. Ooh, just realized something. I can't do that. Mobs would be able to potentially spawn on top of these copper blocks, so the whole top of the wall is going to have to be glass, so nothing can spawn on it. That's better. By the way, the reason why I'm using leaf blocks is that no mobs can spawn on top of leaf blocks. It also has the advantage, and I'm not sure how significant a difference this will make, but there is a separate mob cap in Bedrock Edition for cave spawns and surface spawns. Now, all of the levels except for the very top spawning platform are going to count as cave spawns because they have solid blocks above them. But that top platform can count as surface spawns so long as I only have the leaf blocks above it and not solid blocks. And that uses a separate mob cap. In theory, that would allow for a slight improvement in the efficiency of the farm. That's it. The upper spawning area is done. Let me just step back and get a good view of this thing. Looks pretty nice. I modified the corners here a little bit, as you can see, because when I had just slabs here, I did notice one of the creepers spotted me briefly and kind of flashed like it was going to explode. Don't want that to happen. But a lot of mobs are dying from the fall. I wouldn't have thought that many would. Alright, well, I finished this farm up yesterday, and it came out pretty good, I think. I made a few modifications here from what I initially had planned at the bottom of the pit, so that it works a little better. I reported to Silly that it is finished, and he checked it out. He's pretty happy with it. And he has a payment for me, but I'm not quite 100% satisfied with this yet. I think I can improve it a little bit more. The modifications that I've made to it is I put an extra 8 hoppers around the outside here. Initially, I just had the 4 hoppers under those slabs, but some of the drops were falling outside of that and not getting caught. So putting those extra hoppers in there is fine. I noticed when I came in here, these trapdoors were open. That is not recommended. Don't do that. You don't want the mobs to be able to see you. You just swing at their feet. Anyway, the problem I'm seeing with this farm is a lot of the mobs that are dropping down are dying from fall damage. And I think that has to do with the mobs that are spawning on the higher up platforms end up dropping 1 extra block because they drop onto the bottom level scaffolding and they're pushed by the water streams to the central pit. So they're falling from the top of the scaffolding instead of spawning platform underneath that. Well, I went back and forth for a while, but finally decided, yeah, I'm going to alter this so that the whole platform's up 1 block higher, and I shouldn't have any more mobs that are dying from fall damage. And I can also easily reach in here. This is better. Yeah, this is definitely better. I think I'm at last satisfied. My work is done here. Well, for up to me, I'd junk that garbage, but maybe Silly have use for it. I'm gonna collect a little bit of this gunpowder for myself, and maybe a little bit of this string. Maybe some of these bones. Oh yeah, that's good. That works really good. Now, before I leave, I did a pretty good job last night of cleaning up my mess, but I did leave behind this little sign here. I think I can get rid of that now. All right, let's head home. Actually, first, let me head to the new post office to collect my payment. Bad Rabbit and Major Madden of the Married in Minecraft group had this cool idea. Since all of the members of Divergence are from all over the world and live in different time zones, we're seldom all together online at the same time, it would be cool if there was a post office where each of us has our own mailbox and we can drop stuff off for somebody else to pick up. Since our bases are so far apart, it makes sense to have a central post office at Worldspawn. Wow, things have really grown here since I was here before. This is Silly's shop here. That big giant wall there I think is part of Buster Mart. Yes. B-Mart, that's pretty cool. Should see what kind of cool stuff is for sale here. Actually, before I do that, I should check out the new post office. If I can figure out where that is. I think it's up this way. Yeah, I see it. Last I heard it was unfinished, but it's looking pretty good, I'd say. I don't know what isn't finished about it. It's pretty cool looking. And there's my post office box right here. My payment for my services should be in here. Oh. Oh. Ooh. Ooh. I've been given the gift of explosives, the gift that keeps on giving. Thank you, silly. Thank you very much. That makes me happy. Now, I know that was from him. This is something else. Looks like a compass that may lead to Cat's base. A hat. And maybe a note. Definitely put on the cool hat. What's the note say? There was a cheery young chap called a Sneeze, who sailed through the air like a breeze. He had too much cod, which never seemed odd, and fought the wither without once having to freeze. Pretty sweet. How do you like the new hat? Awesome. Well, I think my work here is done. This was kind of a, what can I call it? A divergence from what I've been planning to do, which is a farm that's going to be a lot more complicated and a lot more involved, but it needs to get done. So because the next farm I'm going to make is going to be pretty involved, and because Easter is coming up and there's a lot of IRL things that I'm going to be busy with, I'm probably not going to get a second video out this week. I may only have one video next week. If you want to be sure not to miss my next video, you should be subscribed if you're not already. And then I can catch you next time on Amon Chooses Divergence SMP.